Good morning, everybody. This week we're exploring flowers. So I'm sitting outside with lots of flowers around me. And I thought I'd show you a painting activity that you could do to make a tree, a blossoming tree picture. So if you want to try it out, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need some water and at least one paintbrush. You're going to need some paint. I'm using watercolor. I've got some green here because we're going to make the ground with green. And I've got some blue watercolor because we're going to make the sky with blue. And the tree, I've got a dark brown color. You could also use black. And I've got acrylic paint here watered down a bit so that it's spreadable. And I also have a little syringe. We're going to do a different technique for making the tree. And then I have a little bit of, might be hard to see, but white and red watercolor paint for the blossoms. You could choose whatever color you wanted for the blossoms. If you have a straw, which I don't, that might also be a useful tool. I do have some toothpicks because I'm going to use those to help me make the branches later. But we're going to start nice and slow and simple with the ground and the sky. Oh yeah, you're also going to need a piece of paper. Something a little bit thicker is good for working with watercolor. So I'm actually just going to start by getting my paper wet because that's going to make it easier for the watercolor paints to spread. So you could use a spray bottle and spray your paper. You could do what I'm doing and use a paintbrush to wet it. You could even put your paper under the tap for a little bit if it's thick enough. Okay, so once your paper is wet, I'm going to start at the bottom with the ground. So I have two different shades of green that I'm going to use for the ground. And I'm going to make these colors nice and watery so it's not too thick. I don't know if you can see the different shades. You can always add white to change a shade too. So you don't want your ground to take up too much of the page because your tree is going to grow out of here. So you want space for your tree. I'm going to clean my brush off and now get my blue paint for the sky for the rest of the background. So I just had one shade of blue in my watercolors, but I've mixed some white into it. So there's some streaks of white, which is kind of nice in the sky. So you're going to cover the whole rest of your page with white paint. It's a little bit windy outside today, so mine's kind of blowing around. So I'm going to do it down here, and then I'll show you in a minute what it looks like. Just heard one of the ducks quacking. And I hear lots of birds singing. You could add lots of detail to your sky if you wanted. But so far, you can see I've got a ground, green grass, and the sky. So that's part one. I'm going to let this dry. And when it's dried, then we're going to use the brown or black paint. Like I said, I mixed some acrylic, brown acrylic paint with water to make it thin enough that I can squeeze it into this little eyedropper. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a minute, let my background dry, and then I'll come back and show you how to make the tree and all the branches. Okay, so now I've got my background that's pretty well dry. I'm going to use my brown or black paint now. So I'm just mixing it up a little bit. And here's where if you have a syringe, you could also just do this with a paintbrush. If you have a syringe, you're going to pick up some of the paint into your syringe. Now this part is the fun experiment. And you're going to squeeze it onto the page. To start making your tree. And if you have a straw, which I don't, so I'm just going to blow on it, but if you have a straw, it's easier to do. Because with a straw, you can really blow on it and kind of direct some of the branches to come out of the main trunk. Since I don't have a straw, it's not so easy to blow without it to make the paint go where I want it to go. So I'm using a toothpick, but you could also use a paintbrush or the back end of a paintbrush to kind of grow some of the branches out. Some of them are going to be thick and some of them are going to be thin. I don't know what kind of tree this would be, but it's going to have blossoms, so some kind of fruiting tree. Could be an apple tree or a cherry tree. So you can play as much as you want with the shape of the tree. It is pretty fun if you have a straw to just see where the branches grow if you blow on the paint. I think I'll use a little more of this paint. Maybe up here. It's got bubbles in it. Okay, so that's the second step after the background, then adding the outline of the tree. Now that has to dry before I'm going to add the blossoms. So I'm going to let this dry. And then when that dries, I'll come back and show you how to add the blossoms. Okay, so my tree is almost dry. It's still a little bit wet. After I turned off the camera, actually, I don't think it'll work now because it's mostly dry, but I kind of moved my paper around, which spread the paint some more. So I have all sorts of different branches and even roots happening with my tree now. So I'm about ready for the blossoms. So I'm going to use, I have this watercolor that comes in tubes, and it's quite thick unless you water it down, because it is easier if you have a type of paint that's a little thicker for the blossoms. So I've got red and white. Again, you could choose whatever color you wanted for your blossoms. And for these, I'm actually going to just use my finger to dab them on. Whew. So I might looks like I'm going to have some red and white blossoms, or kind of combination of both. And you could experiment using different fingers because your fingers are different sizes, so it's going to make the blossoms different sizes. I think I need some more red paint. Blossoms are mostly white. Ooh, dog hair. And since I have so many branches on my tree, it ended up being quite big. It's going to take me a while to fill in all the blossoms. But there you go. I'm going to just keep going until I have as many blossoms on my tree as I like. And that's it. I kind of like this project because you get to use lots of different things like paintbrushes and possibly straws and syringes and fingers. So it's kind of fun to be able to play with the paint in a lot of different ways. I don't know if my tree's quite thick. I don't know what kind of tree it would be, but it doesn't really matter because I had fun making it. So I'm going to turn off the camera now, and I'm going to keep adding my blossoms, as many as I want on the tree, and maybe I'll show you a picture of it when I'm done. Have fun! Well, thanks everybody. That was fun for me. Here's my tree. Ooh, blowing in the wind. Finished, for now anyways, with lots of blossoms on it. So I hope you enjoy that if you give it a try, or just enjoy exploring outside and finding all sorts of different flowers and noticing maybe what the bees are doing. See you soon.